Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of Brotorials. This is Darius, and today we're going to be talking about variables and primitive data types. But before I get into that, I'd like to talk to you guys about comments. Alright, there are three types of comments that you'll run into. The first is the inline that consists of two forward slashes. And this is essentially your single line comment. You have your block style comment that has two forward slashes and two asterisks between it. And this can span for multiple lines, so multi-line comment. And finally, we have our documentation style comments that have three asterisks between them. And if you move your cursor before the last one and press enter, as you can see, they're blue. So documentation style comments are more or less for writing comments about your methods and your classes and things like that to later export to like an XML document. We'll get into that later, but for right now, let's go ahead and go back to primitive data types and variables. Now, a variable is a way of naming data that you would like to store and reuse, whereas a primitive data type, these are basically the building blocks of any language. So let's start by discussing what primitive data types most object-oriented languages have. Okay, there are three different types of primitive data types that we can deal with. The first is the integer data type, and this consists of whole numbers like 1, 2, 3, 10,000, whatever the case may be. We have our floating point data types, which are basically your decimals, so 1.23 and 0.67 or some long decimal. And finally, you have your Boolean data type, which consists of a true or false value. Alright, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the different types of integer types that we have at our disposal. The first one we have is the byte. Now, the byte can have a minimum value of negative 128 to positive 127. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and start by declaring a byte variable. So we're going to start by saying the type first, and then we'll lead in with an identifier. Now, an identifier can have any letter, uppercase or lowercase, and it can have an underscore or a $sign started off. It cannot have a number started off. It can have numbers in the identifier, but it cannot be at the beginning of it. In our case, we're going to do something simple like age, and we're going to set that to something like 27. Alright, so as you can see, we have our type, we have our identifier, and we have the value that we want to assign it to. Now we have the option of, instead of assigning it right there, we could wait later for, I don't know, some other code we execute, and then assign it down here and say age is now equal to 27. Both are valid and both are essentially the same thing. One, you're just waiting later on to assign the value. The next integer data type that we're going to deal with is the short. Now the short spans from negative 32,768 to positive 32,767. And for our short, we're going to make it something like, I don't know, the amount we have in the bank. And we're going to say that it's some round whole number, 10,000. Alright. And next we have our int. And the int, we're going to round on this one. If you guys would like the details of the exact number that it can store in an integer, I'll leave a link in the description below. But for right now, we'll just make it an even 2 billion. To a negative 2 billion to positive 2 billion. And in our integer, we're going to say that it is the number, population of people in the US. And we're going to say that it's 313 million. Now, if you notice, the way that I labeled this variable is using something that is known as camel casing, where the first letter is lowercase, and then every word after the first word is uppercase. So as you can see, population, everything is lowercase, of is uppercase, people is uppercase, and so on and so forth. Alright? Now let's move into the long. Now the long, if I'm not mistaken, is -9 quintillion to +9 quintillion. So as you can imagine, we can store a pretty big number in here. In our case, we're going to say number of stars and set that equal to some large number to 3,0,0,0,0,0. Alright, now if you notice, I'm going to highlight right here, it says that we have an int out of range. Alright, what the problem with this is, the compiler thinks that this is an integer that we're making, but it's not, we're making a long. So what we need to do is, we need to tell the compiler that, hey, this is a long using a capital L, and this way it won't throw an error for us. And now everyone's happy. Alright, now that we finish our integer data types, we're going to move into the floating point. The first one I'm going to talk to you guys about is double, and I'm going to explain why in a second. But the first one is a double. This is the most precise primitive data type that we have for floating point values, and we're going to say this is something like the size of an atom. And make that some really small number. 0, 0, 0. And after that, we're going to get into the float. And for the float, we're going to say something like, I don't know, change in pocket. And I'm going to say that it's, I don't know, 12.96. Now, if you notice, we get an error here that we didn't get up here. If you read it, it'll say that it cannot convert a double to a float. Now what this is saying is that, hey, you know, I'm pretty sure this is double. You haven't told me otherwise. So, you know, I need something to tell me that this is a float. Now you can cast it, but that's pretty bad practice. We don't really need to cast. In this case, all we need to do is just throw an F at the end, and boom, everything's happy again. Alright, now let's move into our last primitive data type, the Boolean. And we're going to name it something like, I don't know, is cool, or better yet, is alive. And we're going to say true. And we can make this either true or false, is up to you. But that is the end of the primitive data types. Alright, thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, email us at brotorials@gmail.com or leave a comment below. Thank you for watching.